So I needed ideas about what to talk about today, so I went on Tumblr and asked you guys to come up with ideas, and one person said book recommendations, so that's what I'm doing right now. You know that I love The Hunger Games. This is literally my favorite book series ever. It makes me feel so many different emotions. Most of them involve tears. All of them involve tears. I'm not even going to take the time to describe what this is about because even if you haven't read it, you know what this is about. So my next recommendation is also pretty obvious if you know me, and that is Divergent by Veronica Roth. If you're one of the very few people who haven't read this book, it's basically about, in the future, there's 5 factions. They're all known for different things like selflessness, bravery, kindness, that type of stuff. This girl Tris is from the Abnegation faction, which is the selfless faction. And when you turn 16, you have the choice to switch factions or stay in the one you're already in. If you choose to switch factions, basically you are just like shunned from your home faction. The choosing ceremony, Tris chooses to become Dauntless, which is the brave faction. They just do a lot of dangerous shit that isn't very safe, but it looks cool. Basically, the first book is all about what happens during their training initiation. So during training, she meets this really hot instructor named Four. They fall in love. Basically, together they learn that Erudite is planning an attack on Tris's home faction, and they need to figure out what they can do to stop it. If you're worried about reading this because you think it might be too much like The Hunger Games, you are wrong, sir. Read Divergent if you haven't already, which most of you probably have. Next one is literally my second favorite series that I've ever read. I'm talking about Beautiful Creatures! Yay! If you read the little description on the back, it doesn't seem like it's a very interesting book at all. I started reading it, I was very skeptical. I thought that it was going to be just like Twilight but with witches. Never did I expect the emotional turmoil that would happen due to this. Basically, you have Ethan Waite. He hates living in his hometown, Gatlin, South Carolina. Everyone's really stuck up and everyone is really stubborn in their ways. His mom has just died recently. His dad won't leave the house, won't even leave the study. And he just can't wait to get out of this town, and he basically just can't wait until the day that he can leave Gatlin forever. Then Lena Duquesne comes to town to stay with her uncle Macon. Macon Ravenwood's basically the Boo Radley of Gatlin. So naturally everybody thinks that Lena's gonna be weird. I also think that because she comes to town and she's different, she doesn't really blend in with everybody else. She kind of stands out, and to them that's totally weird and she's a freak. To Ethan, that makes her interesting. And so Ethan and Lena become friends. Then it turns out that she's a caster. Lena has a little problem in that when she turns 16, in the caster world, that's when you are claimed for the light or for the dark. And basically you don't want to be claimed for the dark because you will turn into a crazy killing machine. I know it sounds just like Twilight but with witches. It's not. I don't know what else to tell you. This is a great series. It talks about just what it means to like be human. It talks about, is it really worth it to be normal? And I also love it because the characters just feel so real. Whenever somebody says something in the book series, you know who's talking. What's evil might have reasons for being evil, and you get like backstories on the villains. I have an entire video on this book series in which I probably explain a lot better. This series teaches you that everybody's a little bit light and a little bit dark, and you have to embrace both of those. Nobody is just one thing. Those characters, they're your babies. Literally every character in this book. And there's 4 books. Each one is more heartbreaking than the last. I cry like every day because of this book series. The next one I'm going to recommend is The Maze Runner by James Dashner. I don't even really know what to say about this. It is so genius. Who What kind of person dreams up this stuff? Like, I don't understand how anybody could even write this, to be honest. So when you read the first one, you're not gonna understand anything that's happening, but you're not supposed to. It's okay. I literally would just be reading, and this would happen. What the f? So when you start reading this series, you are just always going to be confused, but I promise you answers will come. And it will be worth it, and it's just genius. I really cannot express that enough. Go get this and read it, and then read the next 2 books. And then there's a prequel, which I have not yet read, because I just finished the 3rd one. Ugliest by Scott Westerfeld. I read like 5 years ago, so I'm a little rusty with this. In order to eliminate discrimination based on looks, everybody is going to be equally beautiful. To accomplish this, at 16, you go through a lot of plastic surgery. And supposedly when you have this operation, you are like radiantly beautiful, and everybody is equally beautiful. And the main character, Tally, meets this girl named Shay, who is not so into the whole having plastic surgery at 16 idea. But it also becomes apparent that if you have this operation, you're not really all there anymore. It turns you really, really beautiful, but it also turns you really, really stupid. Tally has to decide if she wants to take that risk. That's really all I can say without ruining too much of it, and also I don't really remember in detail too much what happens after that. But that's Ugliest. It's really good. I also need to read this again. Now this next book series isn't really that well known right now. It's a damn shame because this is a great series. I'm talking about Legend by Marie Lu. So I have a whole other video about Legend. You can go watch it if you want. So you can go watch those if you want more of an explanation about this. This is a really easy read. I'm a slow reader and it took me like 3 days to read it. Just read this because it's great and it needs more attention. I read Among the Hidden when I was in 6th grade, and it was my favorite series at the time. I was in 6th grade in 2005, so it's been 8 years since I've even read this. But if you want something different that I haven't already talked about, Among the Hidden is really great. Basically, to control the population, you're only allowed to have 2 kids. And the main character, Luke, is a 3rd child. He has to completely stay hidden from the world. Nobody outside of his family is allowed to even know that he exists. I could not tell you how this book ends. I don't remember. Next recommendation is The Host, which doesn't have a book jacket. So it looks like this. I've never met a person that has read The Host and not liked it. My brother, who's a teenage boy, read this book and loved it. My mom read this book twice. The world has been taken over by souls. Every living being in the world now has a soul living inside of it. Originally, this was done to improve the world and make the world a better place, and there would be no wars and you don't have to pay for anything. Even though that sounds perfect, in doing so they've erased the human race. And so the main soul, Wanderer, starts having these memories and these flashbacks from her host's body, Melanie. Now it turns out that Melanie is still kicking. So they kind of work together to locate her brother and her boyfriend. It's a really big book, so there's a lot of different little plots in it. It's really hard to explain, but I promise you anybody could like this book. It's no secret that this is my favorite book. S.S. Waters is a perfect human being, and then you think that everything is going really well, and then you start crying, and then you don't stop crying, and then you're still crying, and then a year later you're still crying. I literally think about this book and start crying. Speak by Laurie Halse Anderson is a really good book. It's about this girl who got raped, and this is basically just like all of her thoughts during the school year and dealing with the fact that she was raped. If you like to read YA fiction but you're not necessarily into the dystopian thing, you should read Perfect Chemistry. And I did read it a while ago, but since then I've recommended it to 2 of my friends who read it more recently than I did, and they both loved it too. It's just really good. The next 2 books aren't as good as the first one. My final recommendation, if you just want like a quick, easy, fun read, any of Chelsea Handler's books, really. She's hilarious. So those are all my book recommendations, for now at least. If you haven't read any of these books, you should definitely read them, especially Beautiful Creatures, because we need more people to start reading those books. This fandom needs you. Please join the fandom. Seriously, like, you have no idea how badly this fandom needs a sequel. So those are all my recommendations. Bye.